Michael, there's something I need to tell you. Wait a minute. It's been a year since my wife passed away. I couldn't refuse when my father-in-law asked me to marry her sister, so I agreed. But as soon as we started living together, I was speechless at the sight of my sister-in-law. I didn't know how much my wife and I owed to this person, and that ignorance was not an excuse. I am Michael. I work at a major corporation. I've been working at this company since I graduated, and 5 years later, I married Heather, a colleague who joined at the same time. It might seem like a normal romance to others, but for me, it was a great love. She was famous for being the most beautiful new employee when she joined. Her features were distinct, and her smile was adorable. Additionally, her casual gestures were very elegant, and her manner of speaking was effortlessly graceful. There were rumors that she must be a lady from a very good family. We were assigned to the same department, so for a while, I worked at the desk next to hers. At first, I was so nervous about working next to such a beauty that we hardly ever spoke outside of work-related matters. I think I was just another colleague to her. Despite our superficial relationship, things changed a bit after the welcome party for new employees. I'm not very good at drinking, so I politely declined the invitation to the after party for my seniors, wanting to go to bed early, and headed to the station. That's when she called out to me from behind, "Michael. Heather, aren't you going to the after party?" I turned it down. Everyone's drunk, and besides, it's karaoke bar, right? I'm not good at singing, and I don't like it, so I'm going home too. Can I walk to the station with you? Yeah, of course. Despite never having had a proper conversation before, suddenly walking together, I wasn't sure what to talk about. At first, I thought so, but unexpectedly, we clicked, or something, and we naturally fell into easy conversation, and before I knew it, we had arrived at the station. It turned out we were on the same line and going in the same direction. In that case, let's ride together. Sounds good. It would have been awkward to part ways there, so we ended up taking the train together naturally. We talked the whole time until she got off at her stop. After that, at work, we would say hi, chat about silly things, and whenever there was a drinking party, it became a standard thing for us to leave early together. She had many suitors, but I never saw her agree to go out with any of them. Seeing her smile made me smile too. The time we spent talking about trivial things gradually became something precious to me. Eventually, our relationship became the subject of rumors, and the seniors started teasing us. "Michael, you and Heather have been looking pretty close lately, huh? And you two are dating." I ended up being teased. But by that time, I had already developed feelings for her, so I was actually happy to hear that others thought so too. I wanted to ask her out. I wanted to tell her how I felt. I wanted to be more than just colleagues, not just companions on the way back from drinking parties, but to have a relationship where we could meet without any reason. But at the same time, I knew I had many rivals. Heather's getting cuter by the day, isn't she? I know. I heard the guys from the sales department are after her too. Seriously. I can count how many times I sighed when I overheard such conversations in the bathroom. But I couldn't keep my feelings to myself any longer. When a year had passed since we joined a company, I finally decided to ask her out. However, on the day I expressed my feelings, she seemed happy for a moment, but then her face clouded over. "I also like you, Michael, but I can't date you." "Why is that?" "There's something I've been keeping a secret from you and everyone else." What she revealed to me was a shocking truth. The truth is, my father is the president of this company. What? I'm sorry for keeping it a secret until now. I didn't want to be seen just as the president's daughter, so I begged my father to let me join a company in secret. I thought no one would see me for who I am if they knew. Certainly, if people had known she was the president's daughter, the seniors wouldn't have casually talked to her or invited her to drinking parties. I want to date you too, Michael, but ever since I was little, I've been told that I would eventually have an arranged marriage. So even if we were to date, there's no future in it. I can't nod in agreement knowing that. I'm truly sorry. She said that and ran away. But I didn't give up there. Knowing everything, I talked to her once again. Even if it's just for a little while, I want to be with you as long as possible. I don't mind if you leave me when it's time for you to get married. I won't hold a grudge, I promise. So please. I wanted her that badly. I loved her that much. Heather nodded, and that's how our relationship began. We were both busy with work, and even on days off, Heather often got invited to parties, so we didn't have many days we could spend together. But on the rare occasions we had time, going on leisurely dates or relaxing at home, those simple moments were incredibly happy, and I often wished they could last forever. But no matter how happy those times were, we knew there was no future for us. So we cherished every day we had together. Then, one day, Heather surprised me by saying, "I want you to meet my father." Heather's eyes were moist. She looked like she might cry at any moment, but it didn't seem like she was sad. "My father found out I have a boyfriend, and he really wants to meet you." But I thought it was pointless to meet him. To that, Heather whispered, "It's different. My father said, if I truly think this is the only person for me, then he would consider our future together. He wants to see what kind of person you are, seriously, not just casually dating." Does that mean? Yes, maybe. We might not have to break up. Maybe we can even get married in the future. I don't want to marry anyone but you. I don't want an arranged marriage. If I get married, I want it to be to you. So please, will you meet my father? It was completely unexpected. Her words raced through my mind. Could I possibly marry Heather? Could we really stay together? Even next year, the year after, and beyond. Just thinking about it made me so happy I was at a loss for words. Seeing me like that, Heather finally started crying, and I hugged her. "I'll meet him. Of course, I will. In fact, please let me meet your father." That's what I asked for. When I actually met him, he was very friendly. He was different from the president I saw at the company, showing a fatherly side. I was nervous throughout and can't clearly remember what I said. But I do remember him saying, "Heather is an irreplaceable daughter to me, but I also care deeply about the company. Therefore, the person Heather marries is very important to the company as well. Do you understand?" "Yes. And if you were to marry Heather, there's a good chance you could be my successor, but that's not something you can take lightly. Are you prepared for that?" I remember looking straight at him and saying, "Of course." If it meant I could be with Heather forever, I was ready to face any challenge. Heather was that irreplaceable to me. He smiled happily at my immediate response. The atmosphere remained warm, and the conversation flowed. At the end, he said, "Take good care of my daughter," and we shook hands firmly, a memory that remains vivid in my mind. Essentially, those words were tantamount to giving us their blessing for our marriage. Hand in hand, we walked home together. Then I proposed to her. We were joyously able to become husband and wife. After such a grand love story, we were living a blissful married life. But tragedy struck suddenly. A few years into our marriage, Heather was hit by a car that ran a red light while crossing the street, and she never returned. When I received a call from the police, I couldn't comprehend what they were saying at all. What? She was no longer here. When I saw her body covered with a white cloth, I finally understood. Heather, why are you lying there? Let's go home, okay? Come on, hold Madison like you always do. Hey, Heather, please, open your eyes, Heather. She looked so peaceful. She appeared as though she was just sleeping. This happened just 3 months after Heather gave birth to our first daughter, Madison. It was an accident that occurred while she went out to buy diapers, saying we were running low, and I was watching Madison. Only Madison's cries, seeking her mother in my arms, echoed in the room, and all I could do was break down in tears. Due to the suddenness of our parting, I was almost in a daze during the wake and the funeral. I kept staring at her photo on the altar, wondering why Heather wasn't beside me, as tears involuntarily spilled out. I couldn't accept it, couldn't make sense of it. Why did this have to happen? If only I had gone to buy them at that time. If I had stopped Heather. Or if I had bought the diapers on my way home from work. My mind was filled with these what-ifs, and I felt like my consciousness was sinking deeper into a dark abyss. Even though the attendees offered their condolences, I could hardly respond. Madison. Hearing Madison cry in my arms, as if she was calling for her mom, made me break down crying again, even though it was impossible. But crying forever wouldn't help. Heather was no longer here. But Madison was in my arms. She's here. I have to protect her. I have to raise her. Madison is a treasure for both me and Heather. Heather is no longer here. So, I decided to dedicate my life to raising her. To cherish her while loving Heather. That's when Heather's parents offered for us to live together. But at that time, I was so engulfed in despair that I couldn't hear anything, only thinking that I had to be strong, that I had to raise Madison, and I couldn't give a proper response. I will raise her. Although I was determined, the reality of a single father working while raising an infant was far more challenging than the word difficult could describe. Housework wasn't an issue since Heather and I had shared the chores, and I had mostly taken care of them. But this was my first time taking care of a child alone. Diaper changes were still not perfect, and Madison would end up crying. Even when we made our park debut, it was mostly moms there, so as a man, I inevitably felt out of place. Where's the mom? I would be asked casually, and knowing that any answer would just make them feel awkward, I couldn't respond well, ending up troubling the other person. Gradually, loneliness built up, and I became more and more distressed. Above all, the hardest part was feeding time. Heather had been exclusively breastfeeding Madison. Fortunately, we didn't need to buy formula milk, as Heather cherished the breastfeeding moments very much. But after Heather was gone, we were forced to switch to formula milk abruptly. As a result, Madison refused the bottle, making it difficult for her to stay hydrated. I just wanted her to drink. I wanted her to drink by any means necessary. But my haste led to nothing going right. Gradually, my anxiety seemed to transfer to Madison, leading to a vicious cycle where no matter what I tried, she wouldn't stop crying. I also faced tough days at work. It was known that Heather was the daughter of the company's president and that I was a potential successor after we got married. There were expectations from those around us. I had my own challenges I wanted to tackle and many things I wanted to learn under the president. But the daycares I could send her to, including the one at the company, wouldn't take her until she was at least 6 months old. Relying on my parents had its limits. Balancing both was nearly impossible. I decided to take parental leave until Madison could be admitted to daycare. However, seeing businessmen in suits heading to work while I was taking Madison to the park or the supermarket made me anxious. I needed to get back to work soon. But thinking of Madison, it seemed I couldn't return yet. Michael, how about we go for a meal together with Madison once things settle down? I received such messages from colleagues, but their pure kindness felt incredibly heavy at the time. When will things settle down? When can I return? If only Heather were here. The loneliness without Heather, The unfamiliarity with childcare, the rush to return to work, and the growing solitude. Filled with an uncertain future, I felt cornered to the brink of breaking down. Eventually, I was so stressed that I developed a rash all over my body, resembling hives. A year had passed in such a lifestyle, when I was suddenly summoned by my father-in-law, Mr. Wilson, and headed to my in-law's house. "How may I help you?" As I asked while having tea in the living room, he said, "Actually, I have a proposal for you, Michael, which is why I asked you to come." "A proposal?" "Yes, Yolanda, come in." At his call, a woman who closely resembled Heather entered the living room. It was Heather's sister, Yolanda. "It's been a while, Michael." "Yolanda, it's been a while." "Yolanda, have a seat." "Michael, may I get straight to the point?" "Yes." As Yolanda sat across from me, my father-in-law, with a resolved expression, began to speak. "Actually, I'd like to ask you to take care of Yolanda, that's what I'm thinking." What could that mean? As I asked for clarification, he said, "I want you to marry Yolanda," leaving me speechless. "Michael, please." "No, what?" "Please." "But, I'm not thinking about love or marriage anymore, and even though I think Yolanda is wonderful, I still love Heather. I understand how much you cherished and loved my sister. I know it painfully well. That's why I don't need love or romance. You don't have to love me. I just want to be by your side. Please, make me your wife, please." "Yolanda, if marriage is not an option, I don't mind just living together. So please, I beg of you." Her earnestness made me wonder if there was some deeper reason behind her request. But what would Heather think if I agreed to this? Would she be sad in heaven? With that thought, it was hard to say yes. Yet, considering it was a request from Yolanda, whom Heather adored, it was also hard to outright say no. With this new dilemma, I was at my wit's end. At that moment, perhaps sensing the serious atmosphere or the heavy air, Madison began to cry loudly. My mother-in-law tried to soothe her for a while, but with no success. Let me take over," I said as I took Madison to calm her down. But even in my arms, she wouldn't stop crying, and I was at a loss. "May I hold Madison?" Yolanda asked. Yes, of course." Surprised by her request, I hesitantly handed Madison over to Yolanda, and to my amazement, she stopped crying immediately. Oh. She stopped crying. Both my in-laws and I were astonished, but Yolanda looked at Madison with such a tender, maternal gaze, as if she were her own child. It was like seeing a true mother-daughter pair, and in Yolanda's presence, I felt as if Heather was there. The familiar sense of Heather's presence brought back a wave of nostalgia, pain, and sorrow. Ashamedly, tears blurred my vision. "Yolanda." "Yes." "I've decided, let's get married." I resolved to marry Yolanda. Before we married, we started living together as a first step. On the first night, "Michael, there's something I need to tell you," she said as she began to undress, catching me off guard. "Wait, hold on, I tried to stop her in a panic, but then I was taken aback. Yolanda revealed a back scarred with painful-looking burn marks. "Yolanda, what happened?" I couldn't help but ask, despite knowing it was a rude question. "Do you remember the explosion at the company's factory that happened around the time you and my sister got engaged?" "Of course, I remember. The accident where you saved Heather, right?" "Yes, officially, it ended with me saving her, but in reality, part of the burning factory collapsed on us. I instinctively protected my sister, but the debris fell on my back. I was fortunate to survive without life-threatening injuries. I don't regret saving my sister. Since that injury, I've been scared to pursue romantic relationships, which led me to give up on the idea of marriage. So, that's what happened. The explosion at the factory. That was an accidental incident caused by a new employee mixing the wrong chemicals. The factory was completely destroyed. The fire spread rapidly, injuring many. At that time, Heather and Yolanda were visiting the factory for inspection and got caught in the accident. I was beside myself with worry, thinking only of Heather's safety. When I learned that Yolanda had saved her, I was overwhelmed with gratitude and wanted to thank her, but Yolanda refused, saying it would be too embarrassing, and I never got the chance to express my gratitude directly. But to think that it wasn't just embarrassment but the injury that kept her from appearing in public. It's too late to realize now. I know that. But still, I'm truly sorry, and thank you for protecting Heather back then. Even if it was just for my own satisfaction, I had to express my gratitude. It's not about apologies or gratitude. That's not what's important. Yes, my injury was painful, but I have no regrets about protecting my sister. I'm confident that if faced with the same situation, I would act the same way without hesitation. Saving her is something I take pride in. Yolanda. My proposal to you was born out of my selfishness. I wanted to care for Madison, whom my sister left behind, out of my own selfish desires. I couldn't stand to watch the man my sister loved grow increasingly weary. Imagining my sister's sadness at seeing your current state made it unbearable for me. I wanted to help you return to work sooner. I wanted to support you so you could dedicate yourself fully to both Madison and your job without strain. I wanted to revive the spirit of the man my sister loved. That's why I persuaded my father to arrange this meeting. Yolanda's words deeply resonated with me. I'm quite a bit younger than my sister, so when our parents were busy, she practically raised me. If I was afraid of the dark, she joined me in bed every night, always singing a lullaby before reading me a storybook, despite her own fatigue. Without a single complaint, she'd stay awake smiling until I fell asleep. She hugged me countless times during tough, sad, or lonely moments and shared in my joys. I loved my sister more than anyone else. She was the most important person to me. Heather often said the same. She considered you more precious than anything else, more like a daughter than a sister. She felt the same loneliness when your parents were busy, and taking care of you was her solace. Being with you made her loneliness vanish. Just looking at your sleeping face gave her the strength to persevere through hardships. For Heather, you were an irreplaceable treasure. Heather. I'm well aware of how deeply you loved Heather, and I know you cherish Madison too, but that doesn't mean you should sacrifice your own life. Marrying me for Heather's sake is absolutely not right. Michael. I too hastily agreed to marry, and I'm truly sorry. Let's not go through with the marriage, okay? I regretted consenting to the marriage, especially since I felt as if I saw Heather in Yolanda. It was a disservice to Yolanda. What was I thinking? Convinced by my argument, Yolanda agreed not to marry me. When we informed my in-laws of our decision not to marry, they seemed surprisingly relieved. Seeing Yolanda in tears, apologizing and saying, "I'm sorry for being selfish and causing trouble for everyone," I too felt relieved. Although we called off the marriage, Madison and I decided to live with my in-laws. Yolanda also lived there and agreed to help care for Madison until she was older, along with my mother-in-law. They persuaded me that raising her in a large family with many caring adults was best. I had almost dismissed this proposal during the funeral, so revisiting it was an eye-opener. Our lives visibly changed after we started living together. Primarily, Yolanda's assistance with Madison enabled me to return to work. I adore Madison. She's my most precious. However, having personal time after returning to work helped me reset mentally. Raising an infant always involves constant vigilance. As a result, parents are always on alert. The moment that tension eased, I felt a significant relief. I could also view my lifestyle objectively. Though I believed I was doing well, I realized in hindsight that I could have leaned on others more. Indeed, Madison became more expressive than when I was struggling alone. Work-wise, a lengthy hiatus could make it difficult to regain one's rhythm. However, my relatively swift return allowed me to resume my duties smoothly. I'm even slated to begin formal training as the successor to the company president soon. I once inquired with my father-in-law about the possibility of medical treatment improving Yolanda's burn scars. However, current medical treatments couldn't fully heal such scars, especially since Yolanda had other burns besides those on her back. She showed me the scars on her back because they were the most prominent and easiest to understand, but it seems difficult to remove them all. Initially, Yolanda was quite reluctant about romance, but as I persistently assured her, "You should be proud of those scars. I want you to be proud of them for Heather's sake too. Thank you sincerely for protecting her." She gradually became more positive. My in-laws are now seeking a suitable match for Yolanda, someone who fully understands and embraces her past. She seems happy, having found someone she gets along with and occasionally going out to eat with. Yolanda has been proactively taking care of household chores and looking after Madison at my in-laws' home. I'm confident she'll make a wonderful wife, so I hope she finds happiness with a good partner. As for me, I was officially announced as the next company president shortly after my return. I've been working harder than ever, breathed by encouragement from those around me, and feeling the weight of my father-in-law's expectations and his stern yet loving guidance. Now is the time to meet those expectations. Madison is thriving in the large family environment and has even started talking recently. Although it's often hard to understand her babbling, the first time she called me daddy, I was moved to tears. Despite many challenges, that one word made everything worthwhile. However, due to my training, work has become busier, and I've had regrettably less time with Madison lately. I'm worried that Madison might forget me if this continues. Yet, seeing her adorable sleeping face every night brings me happiness. Months after we started living together, we all went to visit Heather's grave. Despite the courtesy of my in-laws to allow Heather to be placed in my family grave, I prepared a new one for her, wanting her to rest peacefully in heaven, away from my ancestors. The grave is in a beautiful, refreshing spot surrounded by lush lawns, where the sunlight is soft and the breeze is gentle. The air is fresh, flowers bloom wildly, making it a beautiful place. I plan to be laid to rest here when I go to heaven, to share with Heather the story of my life. It's a small dream I can share with anyone. I almost laugh at myself as I arrange the flowers I brought and clean the tombstone. I came to see you again this year, Heather, I say, joining my hands and closing my eyes to update her on recent events. I talk about work, my in-laws, Yolanda, starting to live together, and Madison. After finishing, I call Madison over. "Come here, Madison." "Heather, this is Madison. She's grown, hasn't she? Your mommy is resting here." "Mommy?" Madison asks. "Yes, your mommy. Say hello." I encourage her. Madison seems unsure but greets after a moment of thought, making us all smile with her cuteness. After Madison and I finish our updates, my in-laws and Yolanda also pay their respects. I look up at the sky, feeling saved by my in-laws and Yolanda. I want to repay their kindness soon, which means I must work hard in both my job and parenting. "Heather, I'll keep doing my best, so it'll be a while before I join you. Sorry, but please keep watching over us," I say. Madison grips my hand tightly. I cherish this happiness, determined to keep living. That's what I think. This is a story about the moment I witnessed a life-changing event in just one night. My name is John. I'm a regular office worker who just turned 60 this year. Although I am a department manager, I've been contemplating whether it's time to step down. At home, I have a wife of the same age and 2 daughters. Both daughters are married and have blessed me with 4 grandchildren. It's a plain life, but I believe I can spend a peaceful and happy retirement. By this age, I don't expect any significant changes in the direction of my life. I think many people feel the same way. Of course, I'm one of them. My life hasn't been about achieving great things, but I am content with what I have. I thought being able to spend the rest of my days peacefully would be the greatest happiness. I think so. But it seems the triggers for significant changes in everyday life can be found in unexpected places. In my case, it was a school reunion. In the summer of the year I turned 60, I received an invitation to a middle school reunion. Thinking back, I vaguely recall discussing having reunions at our coming-of-age and 60th birthdays when we graduated from middle school. But after more than 40 years, I hadn't expected it to actually happen, and I have completely forgotten about it. However, the prospect of meeting old friends after decades was very appealing, and I was eager to attend. With encouragement from my wife, I decided to go to the middle school reunion. Little did I know then the unexpected events that were to unfold. When I arrived at the spacious private room of the restaurant hosting the reunion, I was one of the first to arrive. Only one other person was there. Having last seen each other at our coming-of-age ceremony 40 years ago, I couldn't recognize who it was. "Long time no see, I'm John." When I timidly spoke up, the other person said this. Hi Mike, it's been a while." Mike. Hearing that name, I felt an unpleasant memory I had almost forgotten resurfacing. Mike and I were in the same class in the 2nd and 3rd years of middle school. He was a perfect all-rounder, good in both academics and sports, and even served as the student council president. He was also popular with the girls because of his good looks. However, he was quite disliked among the boys. The reason was, "Hey, John, lend me that handout." This one. As I sat down at my desk in the morning and held the homework handout, Mike said that to me. He almost forcibly took the handout I had, erased my name written in the name field, and wrote his own over it. "What are you doing? Shut up. A plain and short guy like you just needs to listen to what I say, whether you bring your homework or not. Your lousy grades won't change." Mike was the kind of guy who would forcefully push his own way. It was clearly an unfair and wrong act, but he was a popular figure with power within the school. As a middle school student at the time, facing such overwhelming influence, I couldn't protest any further. Mike generally had this attitude towards most of the boys, but it seemed I was particularly targeted. I was often sent on unnecessary errands to the school store, had my lunch thrown away, and sometimes even had money taken from me. But he was smart. He never did anything that left evidence, maintaining his position until graduation. After middle school, we went to different high schools, and I remember he didn't attend the reunion at the coming-of-age ceremony because he was studying abroad. He was the last person I wanted to see again, yet here we were, meeting after 40 years. Now, both of us are stepping into old age, 40 years later. I didn't want to believe that childish bullying would happen again, but the fear ingrained in my heart made my body tense involuntarily. "Good to see you again. Have you been well?" Ignoring my tension, Mike greeted me with a smile, and I felt relieved inside. Indeed, time seems to heal all wounds. Or so I thought, but I was wrong. "Just kidding. Who are you again, John?" Unfortunately, I don't remember insignificant side characters. Mike's voice echoed loudly in the still sparsely populated room. I felt the unpleasant sensation of sweaty palms, a feeling I remembered from decades ago. Mike hadn't changed at all, no matter how much time had passed. But similarly, I hadn't changed much either. Unable to retort, I tried to just smile it off, when suddenly, "Hey, John, long time no see." Hearing this voice from the door, I turned to look. There stood an elderly man, unrecognizable due to the passage of time. But somehow, I knew who he was. He was the only one who had extended a helping hand to me during our middle school days. "Edward, is that you?" When I guessed the name of the person, he replied, "Yeah, it's me. Long time no see," and came towards me, naturally distancing me from Mike. Edward had always been kind to me when I was down because I couldn't stand up to Mike. These memories, buried deep in my mind, began to resurface. Watching Edward and me, Mike laughed and said, "Ah, I remember now. The dull duo pretending to be friends. Even after 40 years, you haven't changed a bit, leading such low-level lives. As a company president with status and fame, it's like a different world to me. At 60, I never thought I'd feel the need to prove myself or avoid losing to someone." But being sarcastically spoken to like that, I felt a mix of frustration and shame. But I've never been good at talking back. Edward, being a kind soul, never argued and just quietly moved away from Mike, and we tried to forget the unpleasantness together. The dynamic hadn't changed easily over time. Just then, Edward calmly retorted, "Isn't there no level in life? Everyone's different, so there's no need to compare." Edward replied in a remarkably calm tone. Surprised, I looked at Edward. It seemed Mike was equally surprised and quickly came back with a rebuttal. "People who lead bottom-tier lives justify themselves like that, otherwise they'd feel miserable enough to die." I heard Edward, "You only finished middle school. You probably haven't landed any significant job." Mike had always been good at striking where it hurts. But Edward, unlike me, seemed different now. "I don't know what you consider a significant job, but I believe I've fulfilled my duty until my recent retirement." Edward said this proudly. But Mike continued, "Being forced to retire already in an era where the retirement age is 65, that's proof you're useless. Stop pretending already." Mike sneered as he said this, but then other classmates arrived, and the conversation ended there. In the past, I would have only felt frustrated, but now it was different. Edward's presence made me feel somewhat relieved. It turned out to be a pleasant reunion after all. Everyone was so aged that we couldn't recognize each other until introductions were made. As the drinks flowed and the evening progressed, we slowly recaptured our old feelings. Though it started with reopening old wounds, I was glad I came. I ended up sitting next to Edward for the duration of the event. So, we talked about what each of us had been up to during the time we hadn't seen each other. We talked about what we had been up to, work, family. We weren't talkative people originally, but after 40 years, we had endless conversations. Edward had changed in many ways, like being able to stand up to Mike, but his fundamentally kind and gentle nature remained the same. That was somewhat reassuring. As the evening drew to a close, Mike, emboldened by alcohol, began loudly boasting about his exploits like tales of valor. Despite being somewhat distant from Edward and me, Mike, perhaps still affected by the earlier incident, kept directing his attention our way. "I'm now the owner of a top-tier hotel. Everyone surely knows its name, that hotel, since I was always excellent from a young age. Everyone must have expected me to achieve something, but to attain a status beyond expectations and make my classmates proud, right, Edward?" Mike insisted on bragging, always steering the conversation our way. "That's incredible, indeed," Edward responded, showing his magnanimity and acknowledging Mike's success. This seemed to irk Mike, who continued his sarcasm. "Just because we're classmates, I can give you any special treatment. It's a hotel too expensive for poor people like you. It's meant for the Real elite." Yet, Edward, unfazed, simply replied, "I see, got it." I wondered how Edward had acquired such firm resolve. I was genuinely curious about it. It was a question I just couldn't get out of my mind. Annoyed that Edward didn't take the bait, Mike then began a more dubious tale. You can top the industry just by doing regular business. Can you simpletons even imagine how I climbed to the top? He posed the question to our classmates, and seeing everyone tilting their heads in confusion, he seemed quite satisfied. Then, he uttered words that should never have been said. You keep it hidden. Money matters don't go public if you don't talk about them. If you hide it well, tax evasion or anything else is easy. Only smart people like me can climb up high. You guys probably don't have the guts for it. That's why you're just poor ordinary people. Mike, drunk and red-faced, seemed to enjoy this conversation. The other classmates just listened with dismay. That's quite a story, I muttered softly to Edward. Then, I realized something important. Once I had realized it, I couldn't just stay silent, so I immediately stood up. Mike, you should probably stop talking about that. I could feel the blood drain from my face in this unexpected situation. But I doubt anyone around me could guess why I was so anxious. Except for Edward, sitting next to me. However, Mike ignored this final warning and continued to recount his misdeeds as if they were tales of valor. Can't stand hearing about a world so different from yours. Pathetic. Instead, such remarks only made him more boastful. Despite the seriousness of the situation, I didn't want to justify criminal behavior or defend Mike, who had been a nuisance since middle school. But the more Mike spoke, the more I sweated. Unable to bear it any longer, I interrupted him. Mike, Edward was a high-ranking police officer. If you keep going. My words echoed in the hall, silencing everyone. Mike, who had been enjoying his story, turned pale. He knew the gravity of having a police officer overhear these conversations. Edward then stood up and said, as I mentioned earlier, I've always taken pride in my job and fulfilled my duty. That pride doesn't change even after retirement. I can't overlook such talk of wrongdoing. Appropriate action will be taken. Gathering his belongings, Edward prepared to leave. Mike, his earlier bravado gone, desperately followed Edward. Wait, we're classmates, right? It was just a joke to liven up the mood. Please overlook it, I beg you. But Edward replied, classmates or not, I can give you special treatment. You said that yourself earlier. We'll see if it's a lie or not after an investigation. Goodbye. As Edward walked away, Mike collapsed to the ground. Damn it, damn, he cried in a voice too hard to listen to. Later, Mike's company was raided by the police. Indeed, they found evidence of tax evasion, just as he had boasted, leading to his arrest. I heard about this when I met with Edward later. That's when I asked him something I'd been curious about. How he had gained such strong willpower. The idea of Edward, who had only a middle school education and was average in studies, becoming a high-ranking police officer had initially shocked me. I was deeply interested in what had happened to him after graduating from middle school. And his answer was something I never expected. After middle school, when you, my friend, were being bullied, I, too weak, couldn't do anything to help. That feeling of helplessness and shame stayed with me. I couldn't dream or envision a future for myself. So after graduating, I left home and wandered aimlessly, essentially becoming homeless. Then, a police officer approached me. As we talked, I was inspired to become strong, to right wrongs, and to protect others. I wanted to become someone who could defend a friend in trouble. So, in a way, it's thanks to you, John. Haha. No way, that's exaggerating. I guess I need to be a bit stronger myself. How about I teach you some self-defense next time? We can have you getting mig now, can we? The long-held thoughts of a friend who was supposed to be closest to me, spanning decades. Knowing this made me incredibly happy. Once you reach the age of 60, it's easy to think that people's lives don't change significantly anymore. That's what I believed. But I was wrong. The paths we take in our 60 years of life, for better or worse, diverge. And this is likely the same whether we're 70 or 80. So, I'll continue to walk a straight path, even if it's ordinary, one that I won't be ashamed of in front of others. Reuniting with an old friend made me realize this. I'm a 22-year-old chef specializing in pasta. Though I refer to myself as a chef, this field is deeply complex. I am still learning, working as an apprentice in the kitchen where I'm employed. However, my ultimate goal is to master the art of pasta making and create delicious dishes. This aspiration began when I was looking for work after leaving junior high, and the owner of the local pasta restaurant, who I'll refer to as John, offered me a chance. Having been raised by a single father, I frequently had dinner at this restaurant whenever my dad was late getting home. Thus, the flavor of the pasta from this establishment holds a special place in my heart, a sentiment I cherish and wish to preserve. As John lacks a successor, I dedicate myself to training each day to maintain that unique taste. One day, after parking my bicycle outside the shop following a delivery. "Hey, is that you, Jason?" Hearing this, I quickly turned around. There stood a person with a somewhat familiar, yet unrecognizable, face. Given that he knew my name, he must be an acquaintance, but I couldn't place him. Then he said, "Hey, don't you remember? I'm Brandon, your old classmate from junior high." That triggered my memory. "Oh, Brandon, you've changed so much, I hardly recognized you." It's no surprise I didn't immediately recognize him. Brandon had transformed significantly since junior high. The Brandon in front of me now was tall, smartly dressed, and carried himself like a successful business professional. However, back in junior high, Brandon was quite different, small, reserved, and not particularly noticeable in class. We lived nearby and often chatted, but I hadn't seen him since we graduated. I had heard he attended prestigious high schools and colleges. But I never expected such a drastic change. "What are you doing here?" Brandon inquired, and I responded promptly. "Oh, I work here at the restaurant." Brandon laughed and commented, "Really? Working at this shabby place?" His remark was frankly disrespectful. "Yeah, but you used to come here too, remember?" I remembered us both visiting this place when our parents were delayed. Brandon then said, "That's all behind me now. I've moved on. It's surprising, Jason, to see you still frequenting such a modest establishment in this small town." Huh? I couldn't comprehend why Brandon would speak to me in such a manner. It was evident he wasn't interested in a friendly conversation. Brandon wasn't like this in the past. What had changed him? More importantly, I couldn't let his disparaging comments about the shop slide. It's disrespectful to speak like that in front of the shop. If that's all you have to say, I'd appreciate it if you left. Brandon replied, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. I just felt pity for you, being in such a situation. Well, take care." He left, leaving behind those unpleasant words. True, the exterior of our restaurant isn't impressive. Originally opened by John's father, it still occupies the same old building. But the quality of our pasta is excellent, something even Brandon should acknowledge despite the shop's appearance. It was disheartening to reunite with an old friend only to find him so changed and unpleasant, but if he can only offer negativity, I'd rather not cross paths with him again. Yet, just a few days later, Brandon showed up once more. "Welcome, Brandon." Just before closing time, who should walk in but Brandon? Dressed as sharply as before, he seemed like a different person. "Hey, thought I'd try some pasta here for the first time in a while," he said. With no option but to serve him, I brought the ordered pasta to Brandon. Then, after finishing his meal, Brandon remarked, "This taste brings back memories." I was relieved. He didn't seem sarcastic today. Perhaps he was just in a bad mood during our last encounter, and this was his way of making amends. Feeling somewhat cheered, I responded, "Right." As he was leaving, I encouraged him, "Feel free to come back anytime. You might be accustomed to more upscale dining, but I think our place has its unique appeal." "Oh, thanks," he replied. After this, Brandon extended an unexpected invitation. "Actually, we're planning a junior high reunion next month. I'd like you to come, Jason. Here are the details." Since leaving junior high, my focus had been on mastering pasta making, leaving little time for socializing with friends. So, the prospect of reuniting with old classmates was a delightful surprise. "Really? I'll definitely be there. Thanks for the invite." I immediately informed John and decided to take the day off for the class reunion. When was the last time I had enjoyed a meal with friends? With a sense of anticipation, I went to the agreed-upon location on the day. However, upon arrival, I felt a twinge of regret. The venue was an upscale traditional restaurant. I hadn't expected such an elegant setting and had dressed casually in a hoodie and jeans. Although fashion isn't my forte, I knew I should have chosen something more suitable for the occasion. Should I go back and change? But it was nearly time to meet. Lost in thought, I heard, "Hey, Jason." I turned and saw Brandon. "Hey, Brandon. Thanks for making it," he said. I couldn't back out now. However, Brandon and the other arriving classmates, clad in jackets and dresses, made my casual attire seem out of place. "Sorry, I completely forgot to mention the dress code," Brandon apologized. I brushed off the situation with a laugh. "Looks like it. I feel somewhat underdressed and embarrassed." This helped ease the awkwardness, and the nearby classmates laughed, making me feel a bit more at ease. But Brandon's next comment stunned me. "Even if you knew the dress code, Jason, you wouldn't have anything appropriate, right? Guys, did you know he's working at that old restaurant I visited recently? It's as outdated and shabby as ever. It's like a relic from a bygone era." I had to hold back my laughter. The classmates erupted in laughter. I had hoped Brandon had changed. But he was again making disparaging remarks, just like when we reconnected. His demeanor fluctuated each time we met, and I couldn't fathom his motives. As I took my seat, Brandon's behavior dampened my enjoyment of the reunion. The dynamic among the others was strange too, as if they were vying for Brandon's favor. I hadn't continued to high school, but I realized that everyone present had attended the same high school as Brandon. While pondering whether something had transpired during their high school years. "Hey, Jason, it's been a while." Ethan approached me and said. With most classmates gravitating towards Brandon, I candidly asked Ethan, "Don't you find Brandon and the others' behavior odd? Did something happen in high school?" Ethan responded, "I wasn't in the same class, so I'm not sure, but after Brandon's father became the principal in our first year, Brandon grew more arrogant. It's a competitive school, and falling out with Brandon was seen as problematic. Since then, everyone's behaved this way. It seems the old pecking order still influences them, even after graduation." This shed light on Brandon's domineering attitude and the others' conduct. Yet, I still couldn't fully understand his harshness towards me. The party progressed smoothly, and I mostly conversed with Ethan. As it neared its end, Brandon approached me. "Having a good time?" he inquired. Concealing my mixed emotions, I replied, "Well, yes, it's been enjoyable." Then Brandon remarked, "I'm relieved. I was worried that someone like you, accustomed to simpler meals, wouldn't appreciate the cuisine at a place this upscale. It's surprising you have similar tastes to ours." He said this loudly enough for everyone to hear, eliciting laughter from the classmates. "Why are you doing this? Are you trying to belittle me?" I questioned. "Aha, you caught on. Not bad for a junior high dropout," Brandon quipped with a smirk. I was stunned. How could he so casually insult me for being less affluent and not completing school? What on earth do you have against me? It's been nearly 10 years since we last met, right? Unable to tolerate this any longer, I confronted Brandon directly. Then he whispered, audible only to me, "Don't act naive. You always looked down on me in junior high. You might have thought you were being kind to me, the short, quiet kid, but you were just patronizing. I was aware of it. Despite your own struggles, you acted superior. I've always held a grudge for that." What? I never looked down on him. I couldn't remember ever condescending anyone. But no matter what I said, Brandon remained unconvinced. "See, that's your problem, always pitying me. You thought you were better because of your tough upbringing. It's sad, just your presence annoys me," he said angrily. I always thought of Brandon as a friend, but he had perceived our relationship differently. Even though it was years ago, it still hurt. "So today, I invited you here to embarrass you, and you claim to be enjoying yourself. Are you really that oblivious? Your poverty is suffocating. Just leave." At that moment, I realized the truth. I had been excited to see my old classmates, but I was never truly welcome. It wasn't that Brandon and the others had changed. It was me who remained the same. "All right, I get it. I'll leave," I said, accepting the situation. There was no point in staying any longer. I gathered my things to leave quietly. "Oh, look at you, so compliant. That's a loser's attitude. You'll just embarrass this place with your appearance, so better sneak out." Brandon jeered and the classmates laughed. Just as I was about to exit, "Please stop, you are disturbing the other guests," a voice intervened. It was Eleanor, the owner of the upscale restaurant. Brandon was taken aback but quickly retorted, "See, even she thinks you're a nuisance. Hurry up and go." However, Eleanor corrected him. "You're mistaken. The real disturbance is your behavior. Your derogatory remarks are upsetting our valued regular guest. I can't overlook this." A regular, someone in another private room. They couldn't possibly hear us, Brandon argued. Eleanor clarified, "No, I'm referring to Jason, who's trying to leave. He often visits with John from the restaurant. Despite being young, his dedication to pasta making is admirable. While you were relying on your parents, he was working hard. Mocking that isn't funny. It's commendable. Your education might be impressive, but you lack basic understanding and empathy." Indeed, John had frequently brought me to this restaurant. It wasn't just for the cuisine, but also to learn about the exceptional service. Eleanor's support was unexpected but deeply appreciated. "You, how dare you speak to a customer like that? I won't return here," Brandon exclaimed, visibly offended. Eleanor responded calmly, "That's fine. We prefer guests who respect others." Brandon left the restaurant, visibly frustrated. The other classmates followed him out, all except for Ethan. "Thank you so much, Eleanor." When I expressed my gratitude, Eleanor smiled and said this, "It's okay. I couldn't bear to see a hard-working young man like you be demeaned. You're dedicated to your path. Remember, you have nothing to be ashamed of." Her words were warmer and more comforting than anything I'd heard from anyone else before. I had chosen my own path in life and tried my best to follow it. Sometimes, I struggled with feelings of inferiority because of my background in a single-parent, low-income household and having to work since junior high. But Eleanor's words were a revelation, showing me that there's no reason to harbor such thoughts. Now, I'm more confident in continuing my journey, trusting in the path I've chosen for myself. Eleanor's encouraging words will always hold a special place in my heart.